Talk Money to Me is a financial podcast produced by TransGlobal. All opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of TransGlobal. This podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be relied upon as basis for investment decisions.
Hey everybody, welcome to Talk Money to Me, where we talk about money and how it affects you. I'm your co-host Jonathan, and I know a little bit about finance.
And I'm your other co-host, Tracy, and I know almost nothing about finance.
We have two wonderful guests with us today. I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, my name is Daniel and I am a financial advisor.
Hi everyone, my name is Jason and I am an insurance producer.
All right, today's topic is about debt.
Woo!
A fun topic.
I just wanted to get it exciting, because debt's such a dreary, terrible, life soul-sucking topic.
A lot of people have this misconception about debt, about just it being like one-sided, like you owe something or a certain amount of money to somebody. But there's, in fact, actually good debt. Bad debt is where you borrow money from someone or a company for something that is not going to give you equal value in return. Say you just graduated college and you reward yourself by buying yourself a Ferrari.
It's a good example because a lot of young people, when they get a windfall or large amounts of money, oftentimes they'll splurge on things. And then there's also the everyday person that, they might not ever come across a windfall, but the fact that they constantly have bad spending habits. So eventually they put themselves in a situation where essentially it's a money pit, right? You're just falling into this pit and you're never really able to get yourself out because the hole just gets bigger and bigger. But if you actually look at the people that are really successful, entrepreneurs, business owners, basically the top 1% people, you'll be surprised to learn that a lot of them actually take on debt.
For example, like say I had $1 million, and I wish I did, but say I did. I could go out and buy a house for $1 million, right? Just cash, straight up cash, and buy it for $1 million. Or I could say, you know what? I only want to pay a 10% down pay, take a mortgage on it. And this is where a little bit math comes in. If I can secure a loan, since interest rates are really low right now at like 2.75%, I'll be owing the bank 2.75% every year. But what if I can go out and take that extra money that I didn't pay into the house and then put it into investment in the stock market or investment into bonds or anything else, alternative investments, and earn say 6%, right? So I'm earning plus 6, but I'm paying 2.75. I'm still positive, right?
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. So then debt is money you choose not to pay right now, and you choose to borrow first and then pay it over a course of time, right?
Yes.
So bad debt is debt that you can't pay back. You don't have a plan for paying back, and you don't even know if you'll be able to pay it back, and that sounds like it's set up for a really bad situation. When we think about good debt, we're actually talking about people who intentionally borrow money, even if potentially they could pay it back, or the other way, right? Even if they can't, but make sure that that they'll be able to make back more than they borrowed.
Exactly. It's called leverage, and wealthy people are able to use leverage very, very smartly. For example, recently in the last couple of years, Mark Zuckerberg just bought a house, roughly like a $10 million house in the Bay Area. And he put like almost no money down for it. He has like almost no equity in it, but he was able, because of who he is, purely just because of who he is and how much his like net worth is, he's able to secure a loan at like almost 1%. So of course he's going to take the debt because he could throw money in the air and probably make more than 1%. Like he could sneeze and make more than 1%. It's just so much. It's so easy for him to make that of course he's going to take the debt. Why tie up his money?
Mark Zuckerberg, if you're listening to this, if you could just toss some of that money my way, down to the poor people.
I guess.
But then if you talk about just like the everyday small business owner, it's the same concept in the sense of like, for the small business owner, most likely they're not able to afford to pay, 50,000 or 100,000 to start a business up. So technically, so oftentimes they'll take out a small business loan, incur the interest, but ultimately, if the business becomes a success, you pay off the debt, right? And you pay off the interest, and you're earning money from that business.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially that would be considered, good debt or smart investment. In finance terms, people say that's more of a calculated risk. Because even though you are incurring some sort of debt or something where you're owing, a monetary value, if you plan it correctly, it's only gonna help you. You're just in the short term you're incurring the debt, but in the long run you're getting the returns on it.
This is definitely a recurring theme on this podcast. So, in general, make your money make money.
Make your money work.
Yeah.
Make your money work.
Try to spend your money on things that will give you more money back, as opposed to spending money on things that go away forever and then depreciate in value.
So I shouldn't be spending money on a potential relationship because of heartbreak.
Will the potential relationship bring you happiness?
But is
or
it
money? Is she rich? I'm just kidding.
So you're I see how Jonathan views relationships. It's an investment.
So I assume that our listeners are probably in two different categories. One is that they are drowning in debt. They don't know what to do. And there's no way they can even really think about the possibility of taking on another loan or more debt to leverage it for good, right? So for those people, we had a previous episode in which we touched on that. So maybe we could do a quick review. But for people who think that I'll never get into debt again because I'll never owe money again, I'm just going to stay afloat. Maybe we could talk about how good debt works.
I think I'll start off by saying that I think those two category of people are actually just the same category of people, but just maybe different stages. If you are in soul-crushing debt and don't know how to get out of it, don't see a way out of it, first of all, take a breath. Take a step back and start by creating a budget. Because if you haven't created a budget yet, you won't know if there is a way out of it. You won't be able to see if there is a way out of this debt. And once you have created a budget, start looking for things to chop out of your budget. And one of the things that I did, and I do constantly, because in some months when I do overspend, I'm over my budget, I haven't followed it very well, I'll look back and I'll say, okay, well, what can I cut? And my first things that I cut are like my eating out expenses. I'll sub 2 dinners out a night with my girlfriend for 1. I'll sub my daily afternoon Starbucks for instant coffee, right?
You just told our listeners you have daily afternoon Starbucks.
Okay, I'm not daily afternoon Starbucks, but
quick calculation: $5 a day.
No, I've done this calculation. I
$35
know.
a week.
I know this bad. I know how bad it is, but I'll sub out Starbucks or milk tea or whatever pleasures for a little while until I'm back on my my budget. But just start trimming the fat wherever you can. And if you are in a really bad hole with debt, you might have to trim a lot of fat.
I think I had a period of time where I just needed to super not consider any form of debt for a while, because I was afraid, right? And I had just gotten out of a huge amount of debt, and so. But I think probably a lot of our listeners are also in a place where okay, I'm out of debt. I'm ready to maybe I finished my rebound relationship with debt, and
I was about to say you're making debt sound like a bad relationship. Like,
it
all right, well,
was.
you're
It's
sworn
so
off relationships for a while. I'm gonna take a break, do me, revisit in the future sometime.
Good debt can also be someone that has credit card debt, right? But at the same time, what they're doing is they're being responsible and they're making the payments on time. So you really just have to manage your finances better, figure out what your priorities are. And, it's one of those things where everybody knows, hey, I know what's more important, right? What's the least important. But at the end of the day, oftentimes in that moment, we might just say, hey, I'm just going to buy, this nice pair of shoes or this purse or I'm going to eat this gourmet meal this time, because our generation is all about YOLO and having a great time, right?
I think part of it is that you just have to tell yourself you actually don't have that money, right? I think credit cards make you feel like you have your credit limit.
Psychologically, it does something to you when you're a young person and you get like a $5,000 limit credit card or a $10,000 limit credit card. Most of the time, you've never seen that much money right away, right? So you think, hey, because I have this line of credit, because they think I'm responsible enough, or whatever the reason is, you start spending. And it might be 100 here, or it might be a few hundred there, but next thing you know, that $5,000 is you're already over the limit, right?
So I know we've spent a lot of time talking about how we can kind of deal with our own debt, and then if we were able to have good debt, then we can take the money and invest it elsewhere. Is there ever a situation where maybe someone actually owes us, where we're not the ones in debt, but someone else is, and we get to wait for that money to kind of come in when they pay us?
I got a couple friends.
Oh, you wanna call them out on the podcast right now?
We're all bros.
I'm just kidding.
No names.
So that's gonna be Mike. You still owe me $20 for that. No, just kidding.
I think it was actually 21.25. I have the receipts. Just kidding.
Can you please check your Venmo? I charged you on Venmo.
It's been 2 months. Yeah. It's like 5% interest rate on it.
Ooh, start charging your friends interest.
That's the actual solution that we're offering on this podcast is just collect with interest everybody who owes you. It'll help you.
But that's actually what Jonathan was talking about too. You know, like we can actually collect interest in the form of investing in debt securities, more commonly known as typically bonds. It's when like a company, like we're talking about earlier when Jason was talking about like small businesses needing to take small business loans, right? This is what big businesses do. They issue bonds. Facebook, Tesla, Apple, they'll all issue bonds every once in a while. What they'll do is they'll say, hey, like we need some cash. Jonathan, let me borrow $1,000. I'll give you 3% interest on it, right? For a year. And then at the end of the year, we'll give you $1,000 back, right? Sounds pretty good. It's usually a safer investment than investing in the equity brother of the company. Investing in stocks of the company. You can buy stocks of Apple. You can buy bonds of Apple. Bonds are typically safer because you become a creditor to the company, right? They actually owe you something because they borrowed money from you.
I've heard the term corporate bond thrown around, but I've also heard a term that's called corporate deposit. And I was wondering what the differences are, if there are any.
A corporate bond and corporate deposit, they're essentially the same thing. It's just the only difference is who's issuing the debt security, the debt note. Like we said earlier, corporate bonds are when a corporation, when a business, usually a public company or a big company will ask you for money. A corporate deposit is when a commercial bank asks you for money. So like when Chase has their own debt securities, that's called a corporate deposit. But they're essentially the same thing. You lending money to a business, and they pay you a small interest rate back for holding that money.
Is it similar to stocks where you can hold on to a stock for almost forever and you kind of decide when you want to cash in that stock? Are bonds the same way, or is there a fixed timeline for those?
There's a fixed timeline. So bonds usually have what's called a maturity date, and this is when like the debt is to be repaid back to the investor. So like Jonathan in the example, say you loan $1,000 to Apple. They'll set a maturity date, usually like 1, 3, 5 years long. Throughout the whole time you've been holding this bond or this debt security, Apple's been paying you interest every month for every year. And at the end of the maturity date, they give you your principal back, whatever you lent them.
Jason, I know that you have a lot of experience with property and casualty things, more on the loan side and possibly mortgages. Is there a way that we can use loans or mortgages also as an investment tool, even though it's a different kind of debt?
In short, the answer would be yes. It just depends on how you're trying to apply the debt or the loan to your situation. So basically, if you're trying to, I would say invest in rental properties, I think that would be good. But even if it's just me living in this house and I just want to grow old and retire here, what ends up happening is I have this asset, right, that I could actually save for either myself or my kids or my grandkids. So basically owning that property, that's an asset in itself. That's an investment that will pay off in itself, if that makes any sense.
I think one important thing about debt too is like not looking at it just as at its face value. Looking at debt as a tool, another tool. Just don't box yourself into the idea that debt is only bad and that debt can only hurt you.
So I know that when I have debt securities and I lend money out to companies and businesses, they are supposed to pay me back with interest. But not all companies are able to make it. Some companies go bankrupt. How do I know that this investment choice that I've made to invest in another company, why is that considered safer or guaranteed, so to speak?
The safest actual debt security would be one issued by the federal government. And these being so safe, like the only way that the government wouldn't pay you back is if
we get taken over.
Yeah, if the American government was no more. It's a possibility. Nothing's impossible, but it's a highly, highly unlikely scenario.
Oceans rise, empires fall. All right.
So it's not so much that it's actually guaranteed or safe. It's just that it's so unlikely that we are kind of allowing ourselves to take for granted that it is.
Yes, it's just so much less risk because it's so improbable that the U.S. government would, in fact, like completely implode. That the Federal Reserve bonds are very, very highly rated. If you invested in a corporation that went under, that goes bankrupt, what happens is they're forced to liquidate all their assets, buildings, furniture, whatever inventory they have on hand, intellectual property, all of that, and they're forced to liquidate that. And there is a list of creditors, people that they owe money to. You would be put on that list as a bondholder. Versus if you have stock of that company, you're not a creditor. If they have money left over from paying creditors, they might kick some back to stockholders if the company is bankrupt. But usually nothing happens.
Ultimately, you want debt, but you want a good form of it, right? You don't want to have debt piled so high that you can't afford, you're missing your payments, and you're putting yourself into a situation where the bank might come one day and take your car or your house. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but just worst case scenario, those types of things can happen. So just be smart about your finances and start budgeting now and start building good credit now.
Take on things that you can handle. Small debt in the beginning. When you learn to be responsible enough for debt, then you're able to use it more to your advantage, more and more.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and bring this to a close. Thank you once again to our wonderful speakers for joining us today and giving us a little bit more insight. We'll catch you at the next episode. Take care. Bye.
Bye.